Hi, everybody, it's Josh with Talk About Trek, and we are back again this evening to speak more about the Count of Monte Cristo. Today we are in what I dubbed Part 5, which is basically the Count's introduction to Paris, the setting of the stage before he really dives in to the whole giant plan of revenge that he's been planning for 10 years. But this is the just kind of dipping his finger into it. So we're going to meet a lot of new characters. We're going to learn some interesting things. And again, we get a bit of a story within a story, like we had last time, which is fun. I like how this, it adds to the dimensions of these characters when you get this additional backstory on all these people, right? So, all right, where do we begin? Of course, again, we're in Paris, and we are at the home of Albert Morcerf. He's got his own little house in the corner of the garden of his parents' big giant mansion that they have there, right? And Dumas does a fantastic job, as he always does, of describing in detail this room, that room, Albert's favorite room, which is the room that's got all of his hobbies, his instruments, his guns, his swords, his knives, his suits of armor. Just imagine all the things that you would, a young, rich child at this time would get to entertain themselves, all the different flights of fancy, they go through. He's got it all there. He's got this elegantly done up apartment. But anyway, he has planned breakfast because he is expecting the Count of Monte Cristo on the dot at 10:30, or so the Count has said, right? So they have breakfast planned. He's invited 3 of his friends over: Lucien Debray, Chateau Renard, and Beauchamp. So you have a journalist, undersecretary to the minister, and then I think Chateau Renard is just like I'm not really sure, maybe just like an adventurer, because he shows up with Maximilien Morel, the young Mr. Morel who we met, earlier in Marseille, the young of the ship owner Morel. And he tells anyway, here comes Chateau Renard. He tells a wonderful story about how he was rescued. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, what have we done? Okay, no, wrong one. Let's make this big. I'm going to go away for a minute, and we're going to make this really big. Well, as big as we can get it, right? Boom! Check this out. So, this guy decided he was going to go down to Africa to get some adventure. He got caught up in the wars going on down there. This is Chateau Renard here in the middle. He's got his hair grabbed. He was they were in a retreat, right? Here, I'll come back. They were in a retreat, right? So they were retreating, and he is about to be killed, as you can see, about to be decapitated. A really awesome engraving here. When he is saved at the last minute by Maximilien Morel. Maximilien has swore an oath to do a heroic deed every year on September the 5th in honor of how, basically, of the hero that saved his father, from death and certain destruction, right? Everything was going to go wrong for them. The Count, he gets all choked up by this too, and I love how he has to kind of like hide that, as you can just say the noble heart of this dude is just so awesome. Anyway, here's the Count, dressed up. No one could find any fault with his outfit. He's dressed up in impeccable style, right? So anyway, they all meet. And again, the Count is kind of... I love how his... Maximilian keeps expressing like this gratitude, and it keeps like putting the Count off of his game. No, I'm not supposed to be here for that now. I'm here to set up my plan, right? So, but anyway, they sit down. They have a fine breakfast, and the Count kind of entertains them all with his stories and everything, and basically kind of starts to just cement his impression into Paris society, right? So now all these young men can go off. Anyway, here's Debray. Like I said, I believe he was the journalist. I may be mixing them up. Maybe Beauchamp is the journalist. Yeah, anyway. So anyway, he before Morel leaves, he gives the Count his card, and he begs the Count to please call upon them at his home, where he currently lives with his sister and his brother-in-law. So again, you get to see the good that happened in that one part coming back into this, and it kind of intersperses itself into the, it's just fun to see the joy mixed in with the planning and the revenge and the everything else that's going on too. So, oh, and this is also after the boys leave. Albert introduces him, the Count of Monte Cristo, to his mother, Mercedes. So this is like the first meeting, since he was pulled away from their betrothal feast, all those years ago, right? And this is just a very well done scene too. Um, you can almost tell. You can tell that she notices something, right? You can kind of tell that she notices something, right? And I love that. And it was also in this scene I noticed for the first time. I can't believe I never noticed it before. That the Count keeps this little notebook around his neck where he can like keep notes and like jots and like all his little plan, is in that little notebook. And I made a note about that because in all the readings of that never jumped out at me, but for the first time that did. That little notebook must have all of the secrets that he's gathered up, over all of this time. So cool. So, the Count now is speaking with his servant, Monsieur Bertuccio, and he's asking him to please. Again, this is so cool too. How like all of this has been set up for years in advance by the Count. And we, as the reader, we don't get to see that or know about that or how that came to be. We just get to see how the plan comes together. So this is how this part of this plan comes together. So, the Count buys this house in Auteuil, right? And he's going to have this his servant go out there to kind of check everything out. And this guy's acting real crazy about it. He's like he does not want to go through with it, right? So the Count makes him explain his story in full, even though he already knows the story in full because he's been the one kind of orchestrating everything right behind the scenes, right? But this is skip ahead here. I missed that part. Oh, and he does meet the Count de Morcerf as well, who has to kind of excuse himself to go to the chambers. I missed out on that. But anyway, they have the interesting conversation there, but we need to get ahead here. Here we go. That is Monsieur Bertuccio, and he needs to now tell the whole story to the Count. So here is when we get the story within the story, right? And how it ties into the main story, and how the Count found out about all this. Who knows? But it's just so awesome. So, young Mr. Bertuccio tells this story about being basically a smuggler, back in that time, right around the time when Dantes was arrested, the time of the 100 Years' War and all that, or the 100 Days' War, I should say. But he has a brother who was in the army of Napoleon, right? So after Napoleon is overthrown for the second time, it's not a good time for those folks to be about. And in fact, in the south of France, a lot of Bonapartists are being murdered. So this, his brother, he gets murdered right on the doorstep of an inn, right? And Bertuccio demands justice. He wants justice to be done. And he's not going to be able to track down these guys, but he knows about the famous French justice, right? So he goes to see the local crown prosecutor. And who is the crown prosecutor there? None other than Monsieur de Villefort, right? Anyway, Villefort is basically like, dude, this guy was a Bonapartist. A lot of people are getting killed right now. He lived by the sword. He died by the sword. But then he's like, no, he died by the dagger, man. This is different. This is murder, and it's your job to find the murderer. And then Villefort is basically like, no, I'm not going to do it, and get out of here before we throw you out. And I forgot to mention, this guy is a Corsican, like Napoleon, right? And Corsicans are famous for their vengeance. And if they're wronged, they can do this vendetta. So he declares he's going to have a vendetta against Villefort. And until, you better watch it, anytime you go out alone, I'm going to kill you. And then he just basically runs out, right? So now Villefort is watching over his shoulder everywhere he goes, never goes anywhere alone, ends up moving town, changing towns, but anywhere he goes, this guy is always right behind him. He's always right behind him, always looking for his opportunity, waiting for his chance to sneak in there. So, this young guy, he visits this place in Auteuil, this nice little house in Auteuil. So he gets an apartment close to there and starts to monitor what's going on. And he sees that he's going to visit some lady here in Auteuil. and decides that this is where he's going to formulate his plan. So he gets the grounds just right. He knows every angle. He knows every exit. He's got everything planned out. So he plans for his vengeance here, right? So he goes to the man. This is crazy. This goes on forever. He goes to the. Like I said, he goes to the crown. Here, he sneaks in one night. The crown, and he's like, he sees the crown prosecutor coming out of this little room, and he's carrying a box, and he's got a spade, and he's like, oh, he's got some kind of treasure he's gonna bury or something, right? So he waits, he waits until he buries the treasure, and then at the last moment, after like the guy's like patting it down with his foot or whatever, he's like, remember me, and he jumps out of the bush and he stabs Villefort. He's like, my life for your vengeance and my treasure for my brother's or your treasure for my brother's widow. So, and then he digs up the treasure and he runs away with it, gets down by the river. Man, I'm missing all these engravings here. Anyway, here is the house in Auteuil where basically Bertuccio's telling the story to the Count. And here you can see Bertuccio is waiting behind the trees as Villefort is burying his package there under the tree. That's kind of a creepy one, like that guy creeping over the fence there. Anyway, he stabs him, takes his revenge upon him, but when he opens the box, he finds a young infant in there who appears to be dead, but he discovers a little bit of a heartbeat. So what a hero, right? So he saves the baby, brings the baby back to life, and they take the baby and they put him into a nursery. Then he goes back to his sister-in-law, and his sister-in-law is like, you know what? I'm going to go get that baby. So she goes and she gets the baby. They raise up the baby. The baby is awful. He's like, for whatever reason, he's just got a bad streak in him, right? And his name is Benedetto. And this is kind of a titular scene here, too, where Bertuccio is about to discipline Benedetto, but since he's not his father, finds that he cannot do it. He cannot bring himself to hit the son of a man that he believes that he murdered. And that only makes it worse. Young Benedetto becomes basically a terrible, thief. Bertuccio has to go back to his life of smuggling, and in one of his smuggling endeavors, he is nearly caught. So he has to escape through the woods, and he escapes to a little inn. A little inn, you might remember, between, Beaucaire and, anyway, it's the inn at the sign of the Pont de Garde. Caterwass' Inn, right? And he goes into this little kind of hiding space in there where he can see everything, but nobody knows that he's there. And he sees the ending to the story that we saw earlier. So, Caterwass and his wife have got a jeweler from Beaucaire to come to town, and now he is going to offer them some money for the diamond, right? And initially, he's going to give them $50,000, and then they work it down to $45,000. And some jewelry for the wife and something nice for him, right? So they're all kind of happy with it, but except for the wife, she's like thinking, could have got more, There's a terrible storm that day, so he attempts to leave, but is unable to, and has to come back to the inn to stay the night. Poor fella. Anyway, comes back to the inn to stay the night. They serve him a nice dinner. Again, this is all being seen through Bertuccio's eyes, who's watching the whole thing, right? Here they are counting all their money. I love this. So they make the deal, right? He goes and the guy goes up to his room for the night to rest. But Bertuccio falls asleep, and then he's awakened by a gunshot and screaming and thump, 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 thump. And then he looks out and he sees Caterwass come out and grab the diamond, grab the money, grab an envelope, and run out the door. So he busts out of the thing. He's got to see what's happening here. He busts out of the thing. He goes upstairs. What does he find? This is one of the grossest scenes in the book. This is pretty bad. Caterwass's wife has been shot through the neck, all the way through, and is bleeding out. Bleeding so much that all the blood bled down through the stairs into his hiding space that he thought that he was, the rain was leaking in. A warm rain was leaking in, right? So anyway, and then the poor jeweler, he's been stabbed 3 times by the wife. They both die. He goes senseless, runs down the stairs, and is caught into the hands of the gendarmes who had followed him there anyway, right? So, and then he gets put into prison, and then eventually, through the Count's machinations and some, you know, I guess some disguises and things, he's able to kind of work his way to get him released, and then to send him via the Abbé Busoni, his own persona, to his service, right? So again, what a tangled web this whole section is. And that is the end of part 5. The last chapter was entitled Shower of Blood. Very cool section. And again, it just goes to show how far and how deep the Count's plans, went, as far as, and I'm trying to think about how he would have even gotten into this. And he must have been looking into Villefort's past, and then somehow finding about, how, there's so many, it's just very interesting to see, or to think about how he would have worked all of this out, right? But he did, and it was done incredibly. Again, so part 5, basically the main themes is, for me, you're getting a glimpse into the plan and into the depth of the plan. You're also getting a bit of a, did we get to meet? No, not yet. Oh my gosh, there's so much going on in the next part. The next part is huge, but this part is just the intro to Paris, right? So the Count has kind of he's got himself into the minds of these people. He's shown himself to be a very interesting character, and now he has his way in to be introduced to everybody else, right? So that's where we're going to get next. Now, he's just gotten into it, but now he's really going to sink his teeth into all of his enemies and go from there. And that's where we're going to go from there, too. So as always, everybody, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening. Live long and prosper. And we'll see you guys in the next one.